who's violated judicial code of conduct in terms of political contributions. I think that's frankly stunning. Speaking as a former attorney, former law clerk, I've never heard of a judge contributing to political candidates before. I've certainly never heard of a judge sitting in judgment over the opponent of the political candidate he contributed to. I think the American people see through this sort of thing.
Republicans are eunuchs. And the weekend backfired on Joe Biden. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Don't forget to smash the like button if you like the videos. Good audience Friday, folks. Good audience. Smash the like button. Don't forget to follow. If you're on YouTube, mosey on over to Rumble. If you're on Rumble, mosey on over to YouTube. Taking 25 to 30 seconds, maybe a minute of your day to just go over and cross-like those channels does real wonders for us. It can help us more than you know. Don't forget, though, of course, the best place to follow us is right there on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com, peoplespundit.locals.com, where you would have gotten our pre-verdict poll, which got no fanfare because then like 24 hours later, this verdict came down. It just was what it was. So, in response to that, everybody was very much looking forward to us getting in the field again really quickly and getting another poll, which on Friday, we had a very, very good day for the public polling project. So the link is in the description. Keep sharing it far and wide. That's the best day we've had in a really long time. All right. It got us about 45% of the way, probably. Now that I have to go back and look now to see where we're at. I left the old funding project up there because we had done so many polls based on that one and it wasn't filled yet. So I don't know where it is. I'd have to go and check it out, but I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% probably for a new poll was done on Friday. And that's good, folks. So good job. Thanks. And let's keep it up. What we're going to do here is what we can only do, which is talk about, how this is going to impact the election. And of course, there are two schools. There are the political, I would say the conventional wisdom, and they are backing up their point of view with what I would call bogus social science. You cannot survey like this. All right. And I'll get into it more in detail later, but they're basically backing it up with questions like, Trump is convicted. Could you vote for a convicted felon? What if Trump is convicted? Then how are you going to vote? Now that Trump is convicted, that is a loaded question. An undergraduate taking survey design would fail their assignment from loading a question like that. In 2016, because I went back to check to see what some of them the polls that they were pointing to that showed any movement to Biden whatsoever, which is very, very marginal movement, just to give you, a little bit of a forecast on that, a little foreshadowing on that. They all did that. And I went back to look to see what about because there's such a thing. Obviously, there's response biases. If you watch Inside the Numbers, I don't have to define this stuff for you, but there are going to be people who don't want to take the survey because of the guilty verdict. And there are going to be people who do. And that could hurt one candidate or the other. The example I always use is Barack Obama losing the first debate to Mitt Romney, and Pew Research got a Romney +4 after that debate. Romney was never ahead of Barack Obama by 4 points. He was never ahead of Barack Obama at all. How do we know? Because of the experimental panel polling that we were doing back then, that all the experts today who robbed our methodologies were calling bogus or experimental or just straight up fake. You can't poll like that. It was intended and designed to eliminate response biases and to prove that those swings are artifacts of the polling design themselves. It's not a true change in public opinion. So what happened? Democrats just didn't want to talk to the Pew Research pollster at that time. It's that simple. They didn't want to talk to their agents. Obama had a bad night and they were like, I don't want to take that poll. 2 weeks later, it all ironed out. Romney was down again. But here's the kicker. Romney was never down. So I went back to look to see the impact of the Billy Bush tape, even on what was at that time, again, our tracking poll in 2016, was a repeat interview designed online panel, mostly online. It wasn't people could do it other ways. It was the Moda collection wasn't just online, but it was like the advent of those technologies. And basically the panel was designed by demographics, and maybe 25 to 33% would be repeats. And that included people who said they were undecided to those who were soft. And we would see and try to measure whether or not they were truly changing their minds. Back then, Hillary Clinton had, and this is what I'm just going to tell you to make long story short, because I got a lot of clips I want to get through. Hillary Clinton had a bigger bump off of the Billy Bush tape, and which was, I would argue, some in part response bias and in part a social bias, right? Which is when you know the answer that you're supposed to give the pollster, and you have a social pressure on you to choose a certain answer. And I even believed back then that that's what we were seeing. Why? Because there were specific demographics that were very clearly more influenced than others. And it wasn't really about true vote intention. It was about what they said. And there were weird things within that data, like, women telling us, hey, women talk dirty in locker rooms too, and them not really moving the needle. Only a certain kind of woman going back to undecided. Very few actually going to Hillary Clinton. So it was clearly a response / social bias, although we had a very minimal response bias in that poll. Hillary Clinton got a bigger advantage off of the Billy Bush tape news than what we are seeing for Joe Biden right now. And that's why I'm dying again. I just want to thank you guys again for the Public Polling Project, because I don't trust anybody else. And here's the caveat. It's not that I don't trust. There are a few people in this business that I know will do the best job that they're trying to do, but I don't necessarily trust them to be right. I only trust myself. End of story. And while I look, at other people's work, other people ask me to comment on their work. There are some people who get it wrong, but they're well-intentioned. And then there are people who are badly intentioned who end up being like a broken clock is right twice a day. And they end up being right too. But for the most part, they're wrong and they are doing it on purpose. All right. So there's a growing list of them. And I really don't like to cite their, to rely, not even cite, but just to rely on their work. I'm curious to see what we find ourselves. But one of those people, even though I have been a little bit critical of them this year because I've seen some weird stuff. Biden leading in the South, Trump leading with women, or Trump leading in the Northeast while Biden leads in the South. Trump leading in the Midwest, but losing the South. Weird stuff in these polls. And they've actually favored Biden a little bit over the last 6 months. And that's weird. I mean, so we take it with a grain. But here's what they came up with. And they came out after, as I really think they pretty much confirmed what Patrick Basham had sent me. Let me just make sure that I'm totally muted on this other thing here. As a matter of fact, let me just get rid of it. Okay. It pretty much confirms with the poll that Patrick Basham had done, like a snap overnight poll. And, are you more likely or less likely to vote for Donald Trump because of this? I kind of like that question more because you're not giving people this ultimatum kind of question. So if you're going to do it, that's the better way to do it. Anyway, I simply like to mirror real life, which is, do they know about it? You could ask whether they're aware, but you don't ask questions that are like push-pulled, and that is what that is. If you ask the head-to-head, you get an answer. That is the answer. When you then say, but what about the guilty verdict? You're shaming people who chose Trump before. So I like what Patrick Basham did, and I like what Tip Poll did. They didn't do that. They just said, are you aware of what happened? That's the right way. In 2016, we didn't say, well, now that Trump said, grab them by the beep, they love it. Are you going to vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? You can't do that. Or in 2020, hey, have you heard about the Biden laptop? Turns out he takes bribes from China and his son is disgusting. Oh, yeah. And he probably raped his little daughter in the shower. Who are you going to vote for now? You could say, who are you going to vote for? Like typical question. And then say, are you aware of these news reports? Are you aware of this? That's perfectly fine. And we did that in 2020. All right. So I'm going to applaud Tip here, although I'd like to take a deeper dive into the demographics. Again, I trust myself, and that's really it. Right. As far as getting the result right or knowing what I'm seeing. And this is what Tip found. Even the polls that were good for Biden, the best one was Morning Consult. And that gave Biden a 3-point gain. Trump was flat, but because Trump was already up, Biden only took a 1-point lead. Guys, that's noise. That's noise. And there's been something weird with the Morning Consult poll anyway for like a year that they're polling over and over again, but finding the same 2-3 results. It's weird. And I'm not talking about the margins, the spreads. I'm talking about levels of support, levels for someone else, levels for other, levels for third party. It's weird. That should not happen. Not that much. I mean, it's either they have the most perfect design online panel or some weird. All right. So let me just play this other clip from the Sunday show in question that we were bringing up before. And now you know why they are the way they are. Actually, first, let's talk about this first, because I'm going to go back. I want to use this to piggyback off of why they do what they do here, why they say what they say. Despite the court guilty verdict, Trump gains on Biden in court of voter opinion. Remember, the tip poll has been Biden +1, Biden +2. That's it, basically. But Biden has had the advantage. You can see it right here. Biden +3. There's a Biden +3. But in January, Trump had a 1-point lead. He had a 2-point lead in February. Biden took a 1-point lead in March. He took a 3-point lead in April. In May, which was the prior month, he took a 2-point lead. Now it is tied. I'm sorry. I just got to laugh. This is too funny. And here's the kicker. Out of the roughly 1,675 registered voters, a huge percent of them knew about the guilty verdict. Okay. So the stunning felony conviction of former President Donald Trump garnered headlines around the world. And by the way, we're going to talk about some of those. And created sharp political arguments across the US. But did it affect the presidential race? The answer is yes. It seems to have actually helped Trump. By the way, I'm sorry. We also talk about Trump's fundraising numbers because they're astronomical. And I didn't get the clip, but we all know about the UFC appearance. And boy, he's my man. They don't play around. And Strickland, he just don't play around. I don't know if you guys, most of you have got to know what I'm talking about. Trump arrives at UFC. It erupts. The place sounds like it's about to fall apart. Everybody's taking, and he's shaking hands. He's doing his thing. But then when Sean Strickland wins, he gets the mic and he says, what they're doing to you is a damn travesty. We love you. I don't know what would make idiots like George Stephanopoulos, pinheads, whatever you want to call them, think that this was really going to work. And the worst part about it, because the second half of the show I want to dedicate to why we are in this place right now. And I think we have to get through all of this before we can have that full conversation. But it's like this the dominant view in our media and our political discourse isn't at all representative of the rest of the country. And then there's nobody being that voice. And Donald Trump, whether you love him or you hate him, is that voice. And they're not going to turn their back on the one guy who is lending them a voice because of some BS conviction, from a crooked justice system that Americans all believe to be crooked anyway. Are there going to be people on the margins who don't want to vote for a felon? Of course. The question has always been, is that going to lead all of these low prop voters, almost no prop voters, who are just done and fed up? And it's like it's not that you can't motivate them. It just takes a lot to motivate them. They overwhelmingly outnumber these hoity-toity, what would we call them in the 80s? Yuppies that think they're better than everybody. I hate to tell those yuppies and pinheads, you're few. They are many. You just don't see them in the process because many of them gave up on it. The question was always whether or not they would vote, because if they do, good luck. There aren't enough ballots to write in. They'll fabricate a hoax where the president stole the election with a foreign leader. They'll fabricate a coup. They'll wage a coup. They'll fabricate criminal charges. There's no crime. I mean, we're going to play a clip in a little bit. They did one up Stalin. Liz Harrington's right. And you'll see what I mean in a second. They'll do all of that, but they won't stuff a ballot box. Who's naive now, Kay? Who's naive now? The poll was taken from Wednesday, May 29th through Friday, May 31st. The verdict against Donald Trump, of course, was rendered on Thursday, May 30th. So a significant share who took the national poll knew that Trump had been found guilty. In fact, most of them. In the head-to-head between Joe Biden and Trump, it's now a statistical toss-up. But that's an improvement from Trump in May when he trailed Biden by 2. And by the way, independents in this poll are backing Trump. Favor Trump over Biden 38-26. I saw some talk on Twitter like, why is that so low? Go and look at our independents. Until you lean them, they're low too. Independents are more, guess what? Independent. And they take a longer time to decide. Partisans are more decided. So this far out, still about 5 months out, yes, they will be that undecided. And now we may find a little bit more decided, but there's nothing wrong with that number is what I'm saying. And when you lean them, what you'll find is that Trump will actually gain a little bit or he'll hold that margin. In a head-to-head matchup, if it was today, who would you vote for? Another question, what happens when the third-party candidates are thrown into the mix? It's a tie, so it looks like Kennedy draws 10% from both of them. That's a decline for Kennedy, by the way, with which we also found. So Kennedy has slowly but surely been ticking down, all right? And when you lean, he gets to like 10. This is what is a little bit on wonder, it's very close though. But when we ask with Stein, Mapstead, or now, the libertarian, but we were saying Mapstead, when you add everyone to the mix, it's weird. And we have seen this on numerous occasions now. Kennedy will actually tick up 1 point or 2 points, which is really weird. When you do the three-way, Kennedy is really kind of mired at the 9% region. And then when leaning, he only gets to like 10, 11, So he's been slowly but surely falling. While month to month changes are small for both candidates, some interesting shifts occurred within individual voting groups. In May, 33% of independents supported Trump, 25% Biden, 18% for RFK, and 6% other. In June, that's now 31 Trump, 22 Biden, 18 RFK, and 5 other. That shift among independents, who make up about 28% of their respondents, seem to favor Trump. All right, they favor Trump. In another question, we asked whether they strongly or moderately support their respective candidates. It's called support intensity. This is very important. 65% strongly support Donald Trump, while only 60% strongly support Biden. 34% support Kennedy strongly, and 55 only moderately support him. Those voters are the voters that Kennedy is in danger of losing further and ending up a regular kind of Ralph Nader-like third-party candidate, or even more like a Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson was polling very high for a while, and he wound up, of course, cratering. So, yeah, there it is. So while overall support seems to be the same, Trump has a 5-point edge when it comes to the strength of his backing, possibly key to whether each candidate's support even bothers to show up in November. This is important because if Trump is to get those the angry normies out, he needs an intensity edge, because Democrats are now the hoity-toity party and the ruling class party, and they vote. All right. There are less of them, but they vote. When the supporters of potential spoiler, I don't like that word, RFK are thrown into the mix, it becomes apparent that his support isn't as strong as that of the two main candidates. I think that's very, very clear. Americans tie in predicting the winner. They're at 36% each. Interestingly, if we go down and look at the prior results of this poll, Trump was leading this. So this may be some noise here relating to the verdict. Maybe there's like a 2-point swing. Again, 2 points, folks, in most polling these days is nothing. It's statistically insignificant, basically, unless you're like us and you poll ridiculously large samples. This is nothing. It may be, however, just a slight reaction to the guilty verdict and people saying, well, maybe Trump won't win. By the way, we're going to look at some forecasting in a bit. And interestingly enough, the forecasting has approved for Donald Trump. All right. So getting over to who people believe their neighbors would vote for, it's Trump. 40. So that's the old question Robert Cahaley from Trafalgar asked, to be able to gauge whether or not there's social bias. All right. We think we did something a little different, and I like what we do, which is simply say, we gauge their level of comfort talking to various groups of people when it comes to politics, their political beliefs, being honest about them, such as who they intend to vote for. And we go down a litany of different groups, right? So first, of course, your family, your friends, neighbors, coworkers, strangers, and of course, pollsters. And that's the way we have developed our social bias indicators. This is the question many people are familiar with. This is bad for Biden. Very, very bad. This is a huge gap. Huge. And that's a problem. All right. It was not as big, by the way. It was very close in 2020 as opposed to 2016, where it was also something like this, a little closer to this. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that poll, but it was interesting, and it's the poll I chose to show you because it's the poll that actually was more favorable to Biden than the overall consensus. Donald Trump is led in the aggregate averages almost every single day in this year, in this calendar year. Almost every single day. There was one day on the RCP average where Donald Trump was down to Biden, and it was a blip, and it was due to an outlier by Quinnipiac, which had this ridiculous result while everyone else had Trump ahead. IBD tip has been at least defendable, where we're in a country, popular vote could, if it's, even if Trump wins, popular vote wins handily. It could still be relatively close because that's the way the country is structured, and the overrepresentation of the working class in certain key electoral college battleground states. But getting to all of this now, I'm going to return to this week later because I want to talk about more of like the direct impact that we're seeing. Where is my clip? There it is. All right. Another obvious gauge of enthusiasm and support is fundraising. And I got to tell you, folks, on Friday, I saw comments from publicly. I saw social media posts publicly. I got privately phone calls from people that I talk to all the time. They're not lovers of Donald Trump. Some of them supported Ron DeSantis and then left and went to Tim Scott. Some of them, went to Nikki Haley. Some of them supported Tim Scott and didn't go on, didn't go on board with Trump when Tim Scott endorsed Trump. And then some of them are flat out liberals. And the amount of people who told me And the kind of people, the demographic matters more to me than the number in my own personal circle, because it's anecdotal. I mean, of course, all data is anecdotal. But anyway, that gave to Donald Trump is enormous. And it's like, Rich, if you would turn back the time and think about a conversation like that in 2016, it's like impossible. Even 2020, this never happened. This conversation would never take place with these people. Never. They hate Donald Trump, and that's it. All right? Donald Trump's current fundraising now, low dollar alone, is now over $70 million. I'm going to play a clip with Eric Trump and Maria Bartiromo.
Inside information, but as I was leaving my house about 37 seconds ago, I asked my wife, what are we up to now? And she said, just in terms of small dollar, we're well over $70 million. This is $21 donations, $43 donations, right? Small dollar donations. If you add the large dollar donations to it, you're over $200 million, but you're over $70 million. And by the way, Maria, wow, 30% of those people have never been seen before by a political party, right? Right? I mean, these are Americans who are pissed off. They're coming out of the woodwork, and they want to support a guy that they just believe is getting bamboozled by a system. And we saw it with him.
All right, let me just stop him there, because obviously that thing gave me an issue and it was glitched. What I am saying is what he is, and there are two questions that will determine, there are many, but there are two. One of them I've argued for the better part of a year is far more important. And that is, how many of these normies will not show up? And for those who didn't hear what I was saying, that lead among 2020 voters for Trump is less than a point. Among those who did not show up in 2020, it is 12 points. Among those who did not show up in 18, it is 15 points. Among those who didn't show up in 22 is 15 points. Sorry, and those in 18 is 10 points. Huge. The number of these people, these new entrants, and he knows that number is 30%. He's probably going to RNC data center. They control the RNC now. I would go to what we use, which is overlapping database of state contributors, federal donors, voters, consumers, right? They're probably going to data center, but either way, when they look in a data center, they are not seeing the names of 30% of those contributors. This is a huge number because there's two questions people are going to, one, really, the media is going to focus on how many won't vote for a felon. But the more important one is how many of these people will turn out, because they are many. They are legion. And if they turn out, they will overwhelm the hoity-toity. You understand what I'm saying? It's not really close. It's not particularly close. All right, let me go back, though, and let him finish what he's saying, and we'll go on and move on.
Impeachment 1. We saw it with impeachment 2. We see it where they weaponize every liberal DA and AG across the country with one intent: to take him down, to slander him, to ruin his reputation, to try and divide his family, to try and bankrupt him, to throw him in jail, to do whatever the hell they can do. And America sees through it. They know exactly what's going on.
Listen, the impeachment numbers, because if you remember, if you got a good memory, Trump's campaign did say impeachment is galvanizing people. We're seeing new people. We did see new people. He got the most votes of any incumbent sitting president ever of any party. They just wrote in more. And in case, by the way, that was muted, so you're telling me they would fabricate a coup? They would fabricate a hoax that the election was stolen. They would, a real one, by the way, like a real hoax, not one that is like backed up by thousands of affidavits. They would fabricate crimes that to go after his inner circle to try to press to get him. He's a sitting president. They would fabricate multiple impeachments. They do all that. They would leak classified information that could get them thrown in jail. By the way, Wolf did get thrown in jail. The guy was a staple at the Senate. Hi, Roro. He did get thrown. He didn't really go to prison, but he lost his job. He was convicted. They'll do all that. A Reality Winner. I don't know what her adjudication was, but Reality Winner leaked a suspicious actions report to back up the Russia hoax. She gave up her career and her freedom just to hurt Donald Trump politically. We're talking about fanatics here. You're telling me they do all of that, but they won't stuff a ballot box? Are you freaking kidding me? So anyway, which brings me to my next clip. I don't think they anticipated this kind of blowback. They went with the political conventional wisdom, and they're going to stick to it. That's the game they're playing now. They cannot switch up halfway through here. What's Biden going to do? His own son could go to jail. They'll rig it. He's not going. But I'm saying, if Trump wins, that trial is delayed. Trump is going to make sure that he gets prosecuted. Do you think that Biden doesn't think about that every day when he wakes up? He's a father. He himself, now, because of what he did, but I imagine they believed he was legally exposed. And by the way, the people around him who changes diapers every day and hold the bags of cash every day, they're legally exposed. They're the ones who make this up. They have to ride this game. You don't think they think about this every day when they wake up? Of course they do. If they lose, they're exposed. They could be in a lot of trouble. And they believe the political conventional wisdom. There's no way to turn back now. They're just going to do what they know how to do best, which brings me back to ABC this week. By the way, before I run this clip, I just want to say this. George Stephanopoulos, I don't know that I've ever said this before. They spiked the results, partial results of the Langer research poll, the last one that ABC and Washington Post did together. They spiked the general election results because they were too favorable. Still, my reward offer remains valid if you work at ABC News or Langer Research. And because I don't know how big their firm is, but if you have any direct evidence, an email or something, I will give you $5,000 if you can give me an email or a document or something that proves what I already know to be true, which is that they spiked that poll because it was Trump plus 12. All right. So, and George Stephanopoulos had a huge hand in it. And because a lot of people, kind of when I first said that, I saw a lot of people beating up on Klein. Klein doesn't have that power at ABC. He does. This George Stephanopoulos is the perfect personification of the incestuous relationship the Democratic Party has to the media and the state has to the media. This is not a journalist. He sits there with his little glasses on, right, with his little comb over. He sits there pretending like he is some kind of import, like he's Jim Laird or something. He's a political hack. He's a political hitman who used to work for the Clintons and now is on ABC and has made his way at ABC and has an enormous amount of power there. Listen to his interview with Trump's lawyer after he stated very clearly what everybody knows to be true, which I beat up Shannon Bream over last week because, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, you'd expect it from all of them. Fox, you should be ashamed of yourselves because we all know that the Alvin Bragg prosecution was directed by the Biden White House. We all know it. Forget about the logs. It's a revolving door over there. Nobody leaves the number 3 position at the Justice Department to go work as a friggin' clerk for Alvin Bragg, who, by the way, was sitting over Alvin Bragg's shoulder during the press conference when the guilty verdict came out. This is the route they're going to go. They're going to go with what they know. And here's a perfect example of it.
The Attorney General in Manhattan has nothing to do with the Department of Justice. Finally, what do you expect from the sentencing process?
False. Before we even get into what Scharf responds, and he's going to respond, absolutely false. You do not make your way to the number 3 spot in Main Justice and then leave and go work for Alvin Bragg. It had everything to do with it. That's exactly the point.
I vehemently disagree that the district attorney in New York was not politically motivated here, and I vehemently disagree that President Biden and his political allies aren't up to their necks in this prosecution. I think the fact
there's
that
no
the Biden
evidence of that,
campaign
sir. There's no. I'm not going to let you continue to say that. There's just zero evidence of that.
Well, how about the fact that Matthew Colangelo was standing over Alvin Bragg's shoulder when he announced this verdict? I mean, Colangelo was the number 3 official in the Biden Department of Justice who suddenly disappears and shows up as an assistant district attorney right as Trump's case in New York starts to proceed.
After
you want to talk about political you want to talk about political coordination?
This has nothing to do. This has nothing to do. No, it's not. This has nothing to do with President Biden. Do you want to answer the question about the sentencing process or not?
I completely disagree that this has nothing to do with President Biden. With respect to sentencing, as I said before, we're going to vigorously challenge this case on appeal. I don't think President Trump is going to end up being subject to any sentence whatsoever, and we look forward to getting this case into the next court and taking this again all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary to vindicate President Trump's rights.
All right. First of all, I would have been a little bit more forceful. I'm just saying, I would have said, George, that's a lie. Stop lying to your viewers. And you'd have to be an idiot. Why are you insulting the intelligence of your viewers? That's what I would say. By the way, from doing extensive voir dire research, I can tell you right now that for the vast majority of George Stephanopoulos' viewers, that's the first time they ever heard about Colangelo being behind this case with Alvin Bragg. That is the first time they ever heard that. They don't watch War Room with Steve Bannon, people who watch This Week ABC, right? You have a small share of them who do know it and are watching ABC because they're politicos, okay? And they're just hack pieces of garbage who hide the truth from the American people. And then you have older generations who are moderate and liberal, who still watch George Stephanopoulos. And that is the audience that you're talking about there. And then you have a professional class, of course, people as usual. This is the first time, vast majorities. And I'm telling you, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 90%. That's the first time they ever heard that. They didn't know about that. I guarantee you Will Sharf just told them. They did not know about that. All right, so he's threatening over there, like, cut his mic. I'm not going to let you just sit there. There's no evidence of that. Every time you hear a corporate media hack like George Stephanopoulos say, there's no evidence of that, there's evidence of it. Not only is there evidence of it, it's a known thing. A known thing. And they're just lying. I mean, how much time? Listen, if Paul Manafort was standing over the shoulder of some Russian oligarch during a press conference, they would have used that as stone-clad proof that he coordinated with Putin to steal the election in 2020. Are you freaking kidding me? Colangelo was right there in the B-roll. So Orwellian. It is so Orwellian. It's just unbelievable. And by the way, the reaction from the world has been just awful. Awful. Speaking of the Russia collusion hoax. Well, wait, it's 12:49 at 3. I don't want to do that yet. Let's stick first to the why isn't that up there? Okay, let's speak first to the data, and then we will right, because we still have this up. Okay, let's speak first to the data, and then we'll get into it, because I really think, again, we have to do this in a certain order for it to make the most sense. Which one came out first? In case you didn't notice, the Decision Desk forecast came out. It's really cool. I like how they did this. I think that it's more realistic in modern America. Like, these forecast folks where, like, someone has a 95% chance of winning the presidency is insane and unrealistic. Our country is not like that. And it is ridiculous to say even 80%. That's crazy. That's just not how our elections are structured. And you always get these numbers without a legitimate explanation behind the methodology. And I think we should just gleam over it a little bit, because I like how Decision Desk explained. It's very close to what we do. I like how they explained it to people, and others did not. I want you to take a look first at that number. Okay. This came out yesterday on June. Well, it was this version of the forecast. I think it was out like 48 hours ago. But either way, this version of the forecast was updated yesterday. Okay. To win the presidency, we all know how this goes. Our model currently predicts that Donald Trump has a 56% chance of winning the presidency. From the base without toss-ups, Trump has 235 electoral votes. Biden has 226 electoral votes. I will tell you that this is the first year in modern memory, actually in the modern history of election forecasting models, that we all see and love, and we all have been talking about since going back to, let's call it 2010, because 08, there were some, I mean, there was like, Larry Sabato, who's lost his mind, and his tiny crystal balls. That's been around for a while. But you had the advent of Nate Silver and stuff in 08. He had his little blog that really was nothing more than David Plouffe giving him polling from the Obama camp, and him believing the polling more than from Obama's team than anything else. And he would pretend that these were like, he had some sophisticated model where he plugged in all these variables and then came up with this. It was all bullshit. It was nothing but David Plouffe saying, here's the real numbers, and Nate Silver going, okay, I'm a failed sports bettor, so I'm a failed sports handicapper, so I'm going to do this now. And that's what he did. Okay. That's the truth behind it, by the way. So this is the first year since all of that began that the base with toss-ups favors the Republican candidate. Usually Democrats end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 electoral votes. Now that the census changed, the math would be different, but it's not enough to get Biden below, but it wouldn't be enough to get Biden to 226. Biden is at 226 because several states that were considered toss-up for in particular are no longer toss-up states. They are Republican states, and several that were heading in the Democrats' directions are now back to toss-ups. And then the new Trump battleground, the Trump Republican battleground states are now toss-ups. And by the way, most of them are favoring Trump in this model. But here, look, we can see, the biggest point here I'm trying to share with you is that usually Republicans would be around 185 electoral votes base, and Democrats would be around 240. Republicans would have to pull an inside straight, in order to prevail. They needed to run the table. And now we're just looking at a completely different map. So if nothing else, the deranged Trump people that call themselves Republicans, or deranged anti-Trump people that call themselves Republicans and look back with nostalgia of the Bush victory of 2004, that's where the direction the Republicans should go or something. As if, by the way, winning the popular vote by roughly 3 points, but only the Electoral College by 10,000 votes is a good thing or something. As if that that demographic makeup of the country still exists or something. As if they don't hate that, the country doesn't hate that party is a good thing or something. The fact that they hate the party being a good thing or something. These people are nuts. If for nothing else, the simple fact that this map now looks like this proves they're wrong. No candidate they could put forward other than Donald Trump could make this map look this way. That is the cold, hard truth. The Trump or bust voter changes the math. It doesn't matter what the Wall Street Journal poll Nikki Haley shared for freaking 4 months. It doesn't matter what they found. She would have lost Wisconsin. She would have lost Michigan. She would have lost Pennsylvania. She would have come very close to losing North Carolina, though I think she probably would have held that. Florida, I don't know. I'm telling you right now, South Floridians are not going to vote for somebody like Nikki Haley. I don't know. Oh, and by the way, forget about the hardcore kind of Trump voter outside of Marion County or Greater Alachua or Lee, Collier. I mean, I don't know. Someone like Nikki Haley, they didn't vote for Mitt Romney. Iowa, Ohio, goodbye. Ohio might be closer, but Iowa's going back to the Democrats with somebody like Nikki Haley. Yeah, they just don't comprehend. They can't not comprehend that it is these voters who voted for Obama or don't vote much at all, who now vote for Donald Trump, that change this map. They're not voting for just any Republican. That's not happening. Not at the presidential level. And I think us and several other pollsters, after they took our lead anyway, trying to gauge the Trump or bust voter, have demonstrated that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Chance of winning, as you can see, it's been relatively consistent. In May, it did narrow somewhat, but it has been consistent. And according to the Decision Desk forecast model, Biden has never been able to lead. All right. These are the current projections with everybody over time. Although I will say, obviously, if you add them up, what do you get? All right. So they're projecting a much closer electoral college than the polls. All right. And why is that? We'd have to go down a little bit more, but the chart is a visualization of current probabilities of each candidate winning individual states. Here you can see, and we could go down. Michigan is the only one that they're forecasting. In Nevada, they forecast a whole for Biden too, but both of these are so close. What Decision Desk is saying is that they're really it's a flip a coin, kind of thing. It really is. Minnesota is not. They're giving Minnesota and Maine to Biden along with Nebraska too. I actually agree with Nebraska too. It's a totally different place than it was 10 years ago. And by the way, Trump did not cause Nebraska to go blue. The economy caused Nebraska blue to go blue. The governors who were the stewards of that state's economy caused Nebraska 2 to go blue. Go to the mailbox, go grab your credit card billing statement, and go look at the return address. That's why Nebraska is blue. Okay? Or Nebraska 2 is blue. All right. This is where I'm going with. And then I just want to, we're going to go to the more updated version in a second. I'm proving a point here. This is what I like about what they did. They explained a little bit more about how this is done. These graphs represent the distribution of outcomes. We talked about distribution before. From 4,605,000 simulations of the Electoral College vote for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Again, you have seen 538 do stuff like this before and be wildly wrong. You've seen The Economist do stuff like this before and be wildly wrong. Why? Because of how they aggregate their polls and the data that they're inputting. I do think that I'm leaning more towards Decision Desk, even though history doesn't suggest that these simulations are correct. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I feel like I like the variables that are going into Decision Desk's model. They're more of a fundamentals model than they are totally being influenced by the polls. And I like that. That's the way our model is. I don't know how long some of you have been with us, but if you've been with us for a while, like years, and you remember the 2018 election, for instance, we ran in real time the 2018 polls and fundamentals model versus the fundamentals model for the U.S. Senate and governor's races. And I was doing it to prove a point and show you guys that the impact of polls is not always good. I didn't know how it was going to turn out that year. But of course, my experience told me that the fundamentals model actually had a very good chance of outperforming the polls plus. And by the way, that was called polls plus years before 538 called theirs polls plus. All right. Why? In 2014. Why? Because polls have a series of problems that not everybody is adjusted for. It's possible this year we're going to all collectively do a better job. During the primary season, we all did a great job. For the most part, with the exception of a few, we did a good job. And there are going to be, your outliers here and there. But for the most part, I think we did well. And that's a good sign. And then again in 16, we'll just have to see. That being said, I really do always go back to the fundamentals. And there's a bit of a contradiction here because part of the fundamentals say that it won't be this close in the Electoral College anyway. Somebody's going to win, and when it breaks, most of these will break for that person. Michigan may have a 51% chance of Joe Biden winning, and they're giving it to Joe Biden, but Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania have all voted in the same direction, even though several have been very close with Bush and Kerry, Bush v. Gore, Trump v. Clinton, Trump v. Biden. Some of them were decided by 3,500 votes, but they all voted in the same direction nonetheless. The only election in recent memory is Wisconsin bucking the other two. During the 1988 election with Herbert Walker Bush and Dukakis, Wisconsin voted for Dukakis. But guys, last 8 presidential elections, they voted together, and even more if you just take that one as an outlier going back, because of course you have Ronnie, right? Back to back. Okay. It's likely that when this thing breaks, it'll break to one side, and that one side will win. If Arizona goes for Trump by the margin that even the model's forecasting here, then Nevada's going to go too. And I understand that some fundamentals are pointing to Biden's strength in Nevada, or at least being able to hold on by a hair. I understand that because I know what those fundamentals are. But again, it's just tough. For instance, Dean Heller, the fundamentals actually favored Dean Heller in the 2018 U.S. Senate race, but he lost. Why? Because it all broke to the Democrats. Especially those demographics, broke to Democrats. And he could not hold on to Washoe County. That is the more likely outcome in my mind, and my experience tells me that, but I understand the math and the modeling. All right, so the outcome shaded in lighter colors to the left of the dotted line indicate scenarios where a candidate loses, while those in darker colors to the right of the line represent a win. Each bar shows the percentage of simulations resulting in that specific electoral vote count. All right, so what you see here is actually far more frequency of Biden losing. And obviously, so there's a very small chance of a tie. Very small chance. I know we hear a lot about that, but in truth, according to the simulations, there is a very tiny chance. There are several scenarios where Trump mollywops Biden. If you look at the simulations for Biden, if he does win, he's barely going to eke it out. That's what this is saying. And he'd almost assuredly be below 300 electoral votes. In Trump's case, the most frequent and highest probability is under 300 electoral votes, but barely, but he wins many of those scenarios. However, as you can see, there are a lot of instances that came back out of all of these millions of simulations where Trump not only wins, but he kicks his ass. All right. So this is a major problem for Donald Trump. And I know it's difficult to understand until I read it out the way that I just read it out for you. All right. And because it looks like if you're not familiar with how these things work, it looks like there's more blue for Joe Biden. That's not, I mean, you're looking at distance instead of frequency and within a certain range. And that's what you should be looking here for. Okay. There's a percentage of the simulations that you want to see represented. And that isn't how much farther it goes down the line. Now, I agree that there should be scenarios, even though the likelihood of them is very, very small, where Joe Biden could win by like 400 electoral votes, 420. They even have him higher. But look at the likelihood. They came out in those simulations like 0.1% of the time. It's so small, guys. So small. The largest, or I would say the greatest probability as a result of these simulations is that Trump wins between 280 to 320 electoral votes, basically in that ballpark range. All right. Which I would agree with. I mean, I think that's the most likely outcome. Let's say Biden holds on to Michigan. Say he holds on to Nevada. Those have been very tough for Republicans, even though Trump did win Michigan. It ended up being the most difficult state for him in 2016 and 2020, even though he won it in 16. The polling is very good for him in Michigan, but the fundamentals are harder. All right. Now, remember what I just said right there. Let's go back and read it again. Donald Trump has a 56% chance of winning the presidency. All right. Now, there have been some things that have happened since they put that out. Okay. It sat fresh as in 25 hours ago until the most recent update. What happened with those updates? We've gotten fundraising numbers, which certainly is one of the fundamentals, by the way. We've gotten new polling, which is it is a variable, but it's not a fundamental. All right. And that forecast has increased slightly to about went from 53 to 56%. So that's where we're at. The funny thing is, like, Arizona is not as high as you might think. Georgia is higher than Arizona. Let me bring that back up. Hold on one second. There is some weird stuff, and that is simply from the demographic. It went from 53 to 56. What did I just say? 50. I did say it right, didn't I? All right. Either way, let's refresh it. Edit now. And it went, did I show the new one? I may have, like Laura's telling me I showed the old one. I mean, the new one. If I did, then I did, and I'm sorry. But as you can see, it's now 56%. It was 53 when it was first put out. Let's look at Arizona. Trump has a 59% chance. Can you guys see that? Yes. Trump has a 59% chance of, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. We were supposed to go to the other one. Hold up. Jump in the shark here. What time is it? 1 o'clock. I'll take a break in a bit. Hold on. I want to get this out first. All right. Bear with me. Had my thing in the wrong order. All right. Trump has a 59% chance of winning Arizona. Trump has a 63% chance of winning Georgia. Here's the problem. Sometimes fundamentals, certain ones, can lag a little bit. So, for instance, if you don't, it depends on how much they're weighting the polling. But if you're looking at the historical performance of presidential candidates in recent, and we do a 4-cycle average. I don't know what they're doing here, but we do not go past 4 cycles because the trend is just get stale. All right. But if you look at the 4-cycle, and that would help Joe Biden in Arizona, because you would be looking at the trend over time in the share of the Hispanic vote. And even though that it has shifted to the right, it still is it would be strong enough to give Biden a decent chance of holding the state. Whereas if you were to look at Georgia, it would, in most recent memory, it would be a tougher lift for Biden to hold Georgia. In truth, Trump won them in 16 by very similar margins. He lost them in 2020 by very, very similar margins. The polling, if it's right, and I do think it's right, would probably lend Arizona a higher probability because there's a larger share of the African American vote in Georgia. For instance, they're about a third of the electorate sometimes. And while Trump has gained with them, he has not gained to the extent that he has gained with Hispanics. So this is why again, what I'm doing here too is just kind of explaining why election forecasting model is not perfect. It's not. But it is valid. It's certainly not perfect because we're doing our best to keep up with trends, or we're doing our best to keep up with the latest development in trends and applying that to the models, where we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, trying to get rid of some stale data that may hurt your model. You still can't throw it out because you have to look at historic voting patterns. So again, it would make Arizona. I understand why Arizona is a little bit less of Joe Biden has a better chance in Arizona, but I'm not sure that's true in real life, is my point. And then look at Nevada. I mean, that is a pure toss-up. And what's happening here is that unlike Arizona and unlike Georgia, even though Republicans have been failing to carry Nevada, it keeps lurching to the right versus the nation overall. So you may say Trump lost it in 2020 by a slightly bigger margin than he lost it against Hillary Clinton. How is it lurching to the right? Well, because the nation overall was over 2 points more Democratic in 2020 than it was in 2016. So it didn't lurch as much as the nation to the right. It was resisting that leftward movement. And very clearly in other races, we can see that at certain levels. So, between that and the polling, you have to look at somewhere like Clark County, where 70% of the vote is coming from. Historically, Democrats do very well with the Hispanic vote there, and that would hurt a Republican's chances, even if they're leading in the polls by a lot, which he is. He, meaning Trump. It's still, you're looking at the historical voting patterns, and that's going to negate some of that polling. So this is a true toss-up, and even though it goes to Biden in the most in the rating that is trying to reflect the most likely outcome, all right, based on their simulations, I just don't think in general that again, if this thing breaks for Trump, Nevada's going. It's going. And I think, honestly, Donald Trump is in the best position any Republican's been in since George Bush to win Nevada. And I think he's on track to do it at this point. I understand where that's coming from. And, I used to call Nevada fool's gold for Republicans. I did. Minnesota, they're keeping in Biden's camp, 66%, maybe a little bit high for me. But if more polling comes in, then it will move accordingly. Maine, we just have stale data and only one recent poll. It shows Trump ahead statewide, but it's one poll, and I'm waiting to see the DRI poll, and then we'll get a better gauge of that. I disagree with Florida. It's not lean Republican. Florida is a likely Republican state, as is North Carolina. The national mood is not enough for Joe Biden. Demographic changes in North Carolina. I would really caution people who do this, DDHQ included. Guys, if you don't live here, or you don't live here part of the year, you don't know this. Everybody here knows that the latest census undercounted Eastern North Carolina. Many of those areas were prior Democratic areas that are now heavily Republican. It's very much in the voter file. You can see it clear as day. There is not the demographic trends that favor Democrats in areas like Mecklenburg and the Triangle. It's not enough. When people move here from the Northeast, like Republican voters who are tired of the high taxes, they don't go to Charlotte. They don't go to Mecklenburg. They go to Morehead City. They go to Neptune. They go to areas around the, things that look familiar to them and that are more Republican areas. And that is very clearly what everybody knows. And that's why they raised the stink after the census here. Florida's gone to Democrats. I don't care what the Main Street poll from FAU says. FAU followed us every step of the way in the primary. There is, without a doubt, that state is gone. Gone. I mean, if Democrats want to put money in it, do you? Whatevs. Like, it looks like on the map, you have other places you should be defending. You want to spend money there, fine. Donald Trump shouldn't spend $1 in Florida. Go and hold rallies because they're your people. And you always give kudos. You always give respect. You always give attention. You always give love to your people who make the base of your movement. They are the base of your movement, as are people in Ohio and everywhere. But Florida is like his home base. It literally is now. And give them love, but you don't need to spend money there. Cubans know what time it is over right now in this country. Venezuelans know what time it is in this country. All the Republicans in Collier and Lee, in the Panhandle, they know what time it is in this country. You're even looking good in Duval. Pinellas, Hillsborough, even when we talk about subgroups of Hispanics, even Puerto Ricans are less Democratic than they were 4 years ago. It would be an utter waste of resources. All right, Pennsylvania, they're giving Trump a 53% chance. That's a close race. No doubt about it. Wisconsin, however, they're giving Trump a bigger one. And honestly, I'm glad they did this because Wisconsin polls like crap and votes more to the right of the polling. It's at the presidential level, especially. But even at the senatorial level, with the one exception in recent memory, being the last Senate race in 2022. And I would chalk that up more to the changes in the coalitions, Democrats having a higher participating population than Republicans now, because Republicans used to have a turnout edge in midterms that they no longer have due to the education change. All right. So that's what I would argue when it comes to Trump. And we're talking about lumberjack country, right? For instance, with Northwestern Wisconsin, the birthplace of labor, Trump does way, way, way better. So I'm telling you that is a good call. That is a good call. Wisconsin is tricky. It's also more rural than Michigan and Pennsylvania. It's a tricky state to poll. All right, I got to take a break now. We'll come back. I got a lot, oh my God, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 clips that I want to play to drive my point home, because I think this is why I disagree with Decision Desk on the House. I do. I'm sorry. I do. And I'll tell you why in a second. I don't want to step ahead of myself here, but I disagree with that forecast. I can see it clear as day in the polling, and I just cannot see how there would be this big of a difference. I just don't see it. But let's take a real quick break, and when we come back, we'll run some more clips and talk about it. All right? Listen, the world is on fire. I'm sorry. Hate to tell you the bad news. Given everything that's happening, it is no surprise that people are looking for safer places to put their money. Stocks can be unpredictable. Let's face it. Inflation has a huge impact on the value of currencies. And that's why I want to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Freedom Gold USA. If you've ever thought about investing in gold or silver, or you're just interested in diversifying your investment portfolio, Freedom Gold USA is definitely a company that you should check out. What I like about them is that they're really just about helping you make smart decisions in investment choices in precious metals. They believe that the more you know, the better. So they offer you all of these free guides and advice and consultations to give you information that you need to make confident decisions. No pressure, no hard sell. That's what makes Freedom Gold different. Also, they guarantee competitive pricing on some of the best quality and purity gold and silver you'll find. You know you're getting a solid deal. You don't have to worry about extra fees. They offer free shipping and insurance. It's huge on all orders. Plus, you might even get some free silver on qualifying purchases. They will give you $500 in a credit toward opening a gold or silver IRA. That's a nice bonus, folks. And here's the best part. Dealing with Freedom Gold USA is simple and it is hassle-free. You will not get the pushy sales tactics from the other places. They're all just about helping you reach your goals, your financial goals, in a way that works for you. So if you want to learn more, give Freedom Gold a call. It's 888-279-3592. Numbers under the screen. Tell them the People's Pundit sent you. 888-279-3592. Or you can check them out on the website, freedomgoldusa.com/rich. freedomgoldusa.com/rich. Find out about their latest special offers. See what kind of deals you may qualify for. Let me give you the number again one more time. 888-279-3592 or freedomgoldusa.com/rich. Don't wait. Give them a call today. Secure your financial future. Before we get to some of the other stuff that I wanted to get to that deals with elections and some of the other clips, I keep saying this, and I think it's really, really worth repeating. I'm going to read you what Boris Johnson said in reaction to the Trump guilty verdict. Are you ready? This was a machine gun mob style hit job on Trump. It's nakedly political and will make his victory more likely, not less. It was nakedly political. It was completely artificial. The Democrat prosecutors thought they were being so clever, tripping Trump up over this technicality like collaring Al Capone for tax evasion. They probably told themselves, except that everyone with any common sense can see what I consider their real motives, how they were combing the rule book for stuff to use against Trump. The vast mass of American voters could see what I believe was really happening, that the liberal elites were just appalled at Trump's continuing popularity and his ability to connect with voters, and they were using anything they could find to derail his campaign. That is why the anti-Trump lawfare is backfiring. Speaking of England, Nigel Farage is back at the head of his party, the party that he founded, really. Nigel Farage is back. All bad signs for the ruling class. Boris Johnson, I believe, and less so than David Cameron, but I do believe it because we're talking about lockdowns and how Boris Johnson handled the lockdowns, and that I wouldn't be able to argue with you. But it really started with David Cameron. What happened with Boris, Cameron, and the Tories should be a canary in the coal mine to Republicans. The Tories are on the verge of extinction, and they blew the greatest opportunity conservatives have had in any European state to be the dominant ruling party for a long time. They blew it. And how did they blow it? It wasn't just one issue, one law, one decision, one reaction, but it was one guiding principle. They did not represent their voters. They did not carry out the will of the voter, especially the ones who backed them. There are those who voted for Brexit who don't always vote for Tories. They gave them a chance. Now they are decimated. They're going to be decimated. It's like what George Bush did to the Republican Party. Nah, it's worse, though. It's worse. It's probably going to be worse. We'll see. But they should be a warning to Republicans, and Republicans are just so stupid. So stupid. They're going to, if they don't play their cards right, they will end up just like the Whigs, the Tories, now what they're going through in England. Why do you think Nigel's back? He sees an opening. There's a whole bunch of voters who have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to go. Excuse me. On pollen or something today. The throat is scratchy, nose is itchy. Uh-oh. Nah, it feels more like allergies. Anyway, Democrats are trying to throw the leader of their party in jail. And this is what Republicans are doing on Capitol Hill today.
Discussing breaking federal law, deleting official records, and sharing private government information with grant recipients. The office you directed and those serving under your leadership chose to flout the law and bragged about it. Why did you allow your office to be unaccountable to the American people? You were the highest paid person in the government. This makes you more accountable to the people, not less. Dr. Fauci, whether intentional or not, you became so powerful that any disagreements the public had with you were forbidden and censored on social and most legacy media time and time again. This is why so many Americans became so angry, because this was fundamentally un-American. If I make a mistake, I answer to the people of Ohio who elected me and to my own conscience. When you and your agency made mistakes, Dr. Fauci, what happened? We all need to be held accountable. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, we were wrong.
So the whole country is in uproar. People like this, like Michelle here, she had an anecdote I wanted to share because I'm telling you, same thing. The Harris Teeter I went to, they were furious. The country's in an uproar, and Republicans are holding sham hearings with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Does anyone seriously think Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is one of the biggest criminals of the 21st century, of the new millennia, excuse me. So far, we'll see. It's early. Don't worry, Fauci. Someone might surpass you yet on the rate we're going. Let me put it this way. If you were to watch mainstream TV and watch people with TDS and just, or the way the media is now, they all have TDS. I mean, nobody's grounded in reality anymore. It's just one crazy, it's like hyperbole, platitude, hyperbole, platitude, hyperbole, platitude. That's what news is now. It's ridiculous. But the general narrative would be the country is in danger, the democracy itself is in danger because of Donald Trump. Our system of government's in danger because of Donald Trump. Trump's going to dismantle the government, and if he wins, he's going to do this. And he destroyed. It's in truth, all of these people who care about so-called norms and institutions destroyed every single one of them just to oppose Donald Trump. But here's the real truth. One of those is not the cause of the other, as the media would have you believe. The country is in decline because of people like Donald Trump. The country was in decline, and then Donald Trump came around because the country was in decline. Ultimately, both of those things, Donald Trump and the decline of the country, are really due to one thing, which is that the Republican Party has failed to be an effective countervailing force to the ruling class and the party that it has represented. And I say that like that now because very clearly it's the Democratic Party. But as recently as 20 years ago, the ruling class was represented by the Republican Party and then some of the Democratic Party, because it is a uniparty ruling class. It's just that one may be dominant at a given time over the other. And there was nobody in the Republican Party representing the actual Republican voter. They listened though. They trusted. They listened to the Bush. He ran them into an unjust war that killed and maimed millions without good cause based on lies. They lost the just war. They crashed the economy. They put us in a debt so large we cannot get out of it. We squandered 250 years worth of national debt in the period of 2 decades. It's unbelievable. We had a peace dividend and the ruling class squandered it all. Meanwhile, they were prospering, and the rest of the country, for the most part, if they're not servants of the ruling class, we're suffering. 20 years later, the peace dividend, 25 now, the peace dividend's gone. We're bankrupt. Offshoring is done, almost incomplete. Trump was in the Trump era. Some of those jobs, in fact, were coming back. We went over that in a show like last month. I mean, it's demonstrably true. The manufacturing base of the country was coming back under Trump. It's gone again now, and it's becoming more again of a service sector and slave economy, part-time slave economy. Than it is a strong economy. You need a country that has a sound goods producing sector, because that's what turns latent power into military power. If you don't have that, you can't do it. You rely on your enemies to give you materials and to produce things that you need to defend yourself. That is the dumbest thing in the world. It's like the Romans paying the Visigoths to fight Visigoths, to keep the Visigoths at bay. Well, eventually one day the other tribes are just going to say, go get them. Especially when, what happened? You run out of gold. You run out of extortion money, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's litany of things you can call it. Republicans have always been the party that had at least a base, that cared about working America. Democrats at one time were supposedly the party of the little guy. That was short-lived, even though their image was maintained for a long time. Now they are clearly the party they're back to where they originally started, which is the party of the state. And I would argue they never stopped being that. But in the image of the public, Republicans for a brief time became the party of Wall Street and the wealthy. And now we're back to the original situation. And because Republicans do not represent their voters and because if they did, they would be a countervailing force to these forces that are going against the normal American, the actual American citizen. They would be the actual American citizen's vehicle, their way of countering those forces. It's supposed to be a two-party rule. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to work. And we're supposed to have a pendulum here that at least swings back and forth. That has not been the case. Democrats have been winning and winning for a long time, or the state has been winning and winning for a long time. Show hearings like this one, which will result in nothing, are not going to do anything about it. Meanwhile, again, like I said, they're trying to imprison, because you guys got to, for those who are out there who think they're not going to try to put him in prison, you're nuts. They are going to put him in prison. James Comer, I know it to be true, has denied several actual attempts to subpoena Merchan's daughter to get to the bottom of, because of what George Stephanopoulos said there's no evidence of. He can only say that because, again, Republicans are not effective countervailing forces. We know Biden is behind the prosecutions. We know, or at least the Biden White House. Biden's not behind anything but the drool on his chin and the shit in his pants. Let's be real. You know what I'm talking about. And Democrats know it, so they just sit back and laugh, man. The day after this interview, that's the hearing they're holding. And by the way, just in case you missed it, because you were getting ready to tune in Inside the Numbers, Anthony Fauci admitted, if you put all of what he said together with the questions, he admitted that there was a SARS playbook a SARS pandemic playbook, which I've told you before, they ripped up. We've had a SARS playbook for a long time. And because of, Southeast Asia, they have had these pandemics before. This is not novel, right? That word they used all the time. It's not novel. They ripped up a playbook and he admitted to it and replaced it with stuff there was no science to back up. Social distancing. Fauci could not admit under oath that there was any science to back up the concept of social distancing. None whatsoever. In fact, the original SARS handbook is very clear that transmission is highest when you confine people to spaces for long periods of time indoors together. and then give them limited places to go where they will congregate. For instance, the grocery store. And then they go back home. They get exposed to the virus, get back home, stay indoors for an extended period of time. And guess what? Transmissions. That was always the playbook for SARS-related pandemics. Also in the playbook, school closures. Children, when it comes to SARS, do not carry the antibody level, do not carry the levels that adults carry. Therefore, they are not like petri dishes like they are with the flu. Closing schools did nothing but retard our children's growth and education, and did not stop transmissions. And by the way, if we sent them to school, it would not have led to a higher transmission rate. It wouldn't have. They would have got it. I mean, everyone was going to get it anyway. What it would have done was work its way through the population with natural immunity the way it's supposed to, and that would have been the end of it. Which brings me to the vaccine. He gave a roundabout answer, which is still a lie. He knew that the original vaccine was not effective at preventing people from getting the virus. It did not prevent transmission of that virus, and there are documents to prove it. Why didn't they get them? Pfizer told them this virus will mutate, and by the time the vaccine is out, by the way, we're just letting you know, this is for alpha. There will be another one, and it won't do anything for it. That's okay. I'll take your money. I want that money. It's billions. And by the way, I'm going to build a lobbyist army to make sure people like him and Comer don't do a fucking thing about it. They own those. They own more, they own Capitol Hill, including Republicans. Masking. He admitted under oath there is absolutely no science masking children. None. No science in masking children in schools. In fact, the only science there is that it retards their learning. Social and cognitive skills, like we talked about. Like YouTube banned me for saying, even though I ran a clip from the United Kingdom's health minister. Banned for it, for going against Fauci's Minister of Health. Mr. Minister of Health himself. It was all a lie. All of it. Why? Oh, by the way, the origin story. He knew in January that was a lie. He just lied under oath. Nothing will happen to Dr. Fauci. Nothing. Not at this rate. Meanwhile, Democrats are just laughing all the way to the bank. And that's why I'm telling you, the real cause of all of this is that there has never been a party to counter it's a two-party system. And there has never been an effective party to act as that countervailing force so really it's just a one-party rule. So all of the people who have been talking about the uniparty forever, they were right. And that uniparty, dominated by the ruling class, has not governed this country responsibly, competently, and justly. And now we're in decline, rapid decline. And Raskin has the audacity to talk about how during the pandemic, we almost became a textbook, as political scientists define it, failed state. Oh, we're on our way to being a failed state, all right. And this is Democrats. If I play this clip, it's such a perfect example. They know that Republicans are neutered little bitches. They know that Republicans won't do anything. Let's roll it.
From Florida and apologizing to you that some of our colleagues in the United States House of Representatives seem to want to drag your name through the mud. They're treating you, Dr. Fauci, like a convicted felon. Actually, you probably wish they were treating you like a convicted felon. They treat convicted felons with love and admiration.
And there it is. Concoct charges without an underlying crime. Convict your opponents, protect the criminals, call the criminals heroes and patriots, call the heroes and patriots criminals, and know you can do it because there's nobody who's going to do anything about it.
Some of them blindly worship convicted felons. Is there anything else you would like to say to the American people about your service to America during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic?
This is funny. I guess I just have a different definition of a criminal or even just a bad person. A bad person, because that's really what it comes down to, right? That's what our laws are supposed to be. Marcus Tullius Cicero. Laws are but a reflection of society's values. This man thinks concocting a crime that doesn't exist out of a misdemeanor to make it into hype it up into a felony, to blow it up into a felony in a show trial Soviet style, makes someone a criminal, yet he's sitting across from somebody who's literally responsible for 22% of the American public telling us that they personally or know someone close to them who has been severely injured by his vaccine. 22%. Let's call it 340 million people in this country. That's 68 million people. You would never get anywhere near a forecasted burden estimate for a flu vaccine, for any of the vaccines that are on the mandated list right now. Never. You would never get numbers like that. The polio vaccine, like if I was to have polled any of those others, it would be nothing. Statistically insignificant. This man caused what he said it would be inconvenient economically. He caused the ruination of whole families and businesses that went out, family businesses that were in business for generations, gone. Business jobs that will never come back, not at this rate. He has destroyed millions of lives. People lost their jobs because they refused to take the vaccine that he deemed safe and efficient, safe and effective. I guess I just haven't been. He worships, talk about worshiping. He worships a president who killed a 16-year-old U.S. citizen execution style with a drone. No arrest, no charges, no jury, no trial, no jury, no verdict. Barack Obama just thought, I'm judge, jury, and executioner, and he's sitting next to a bad man in a truck, so he dies too. What the folks? George Bush started a war, an unjust war, based on a lie that, again, the estimates vary. It's, let's say, 1 million. Let's call it 1 million killed and maimed Iraqi citizens who, by the way, were serving as a great counter to Iran. He killed and maimed all those people off of a lie. Which one's criminal? Who's a criminal? By the way, Jamie Raskin loves him now. He used to call for him to be tried at The Hague. This is the bar we set? This is the first prosecution of a president? You have a disgraced former FBI director running around with Democrats pretending to be journalists and anchors, speculating on how they could throw Donald Trump in jail. And listen to what he says.
So a lot of people have suggested that there are a range of factors that would make it difficult to put the system has not been tested in this way. Do you agree with that it would be difficult or nearly impossible for the law enforcement institutions to put him in actual jail?
Listen to what he said.
They would just put him in a double wide somewhere out near the fence, out in the grass. And
Stop.
he would eat there, he'd shower there, he'd exercise there, he'd be away, as Danya Perry said, from general population, but it's obviously doable.
A double wide. You think that he didn't choose those words? A double wide. That's what he thinks of you. You're all trailer park trash in Jim Comey's eyes. And Donald Trump is the leader of the trailer park trash movement. A double wide. If you think that wasn't a complete, intentional, and accurate reflection of what Jim Comey thinks about you and Donald Trump and his supporters, put him in a double wide. He'll go from Trump Tower, his name in gold, to a double wide. That's the power of the state. And if you think that this appellate division is going to save Donald Trump from an unjust persecution, you got another thing coming. I think Will's right. I think this will have to go to the Supreme Court. They'll let rapist Harvey Weinstein off, even though that case was much grayer. Why? They'll overturn his verdict. Well, that's Michelle Obama's buddy. It doesn't matter. He's a rapist. That's Michelle Obama's buddy. It's all that matters. In fact, Harvey Weinstein was buddies with every big name Democrat you've heard about in your lifetime. Same thing goes for Ed Buck. Adam Schiff takes to Twitter. Law and order prevails. Adam, when did you find out that your bestie was drugging black men, young black men, so he could rape them at his house? When did you find that out, Adam? You ever go over his house when he was drugging young black men to rape, Adam? Oh, what's up, little buddy? You want to say hello? Yeah. All right, but I don't want you on camera, but just say hello. Wait, you can wave. Wait a little bit further. Don't put your face on camera. I don't want your face on camera. There are crazy people out there. Not my followers, but we got what called trolls. All right? You got to stay over here. Where's mommy? Yeah. What's mommy doing?
She watch TV.
She's watching daddy on the thing. Hey, Laura, if you're watching on the thing, or did you switch off and you're watching something else?
Good.
She switch off and watch something else? Hold on 1 second. Where's mommy? Let's go get her.
Hey.
No, you can't go on camera. We're watching Inside the Numbers, dude. Hey, Laura, are you missing somebody? Laura, I'm interrupting the whole show right now. Yeah, Go upstairs, baby. I'll be right there, okay? Daddy's almost done, dude. I'll be right there. Sneaky. He snuck away, man. I could take Winston. I can't take him. Sneaky. All right, but the question is that, and folks, this is why you should take this seriously. He's why. I don't care what the hell is after your last name, Democrat, Republican. He's why you should take this seriously. The hell kind of world are these children going to live in? What the hell kind of world are these children going to grow up in? Going to go to work in? Going to raise their families in? God forbid he speaks up against this schmuck and his ilk. They're going to get rounded up. I'm going to play a clip from, you know her. She's been on the show before. Many of you know her. You love her. She was talking to Emerald Robinson and she said something. And I'm not trying to leave you with a downer here. Okay? But I think it's important. I think what she said is worth playing. Because there really are only two ways the American public, well, there's one way that the American public can fight against injustices like this. I guess they could try to get their vehicles of their supposed other, representatives to do their part. But there's only one thing American people can do, like the actual people can do. And that is tough because it's like, if that's, I'm not saying it's not going to change. I'm not saying that. I don't want you to take my words out of context here. It's just, they have crossed the Rubicon. It's crossed. Like I said on Friday, the country you had at the beginning of last week is gone. And I would argue, as I do in my own book that I wrote 20 years ago, it really has been gone for quite a while. Part of it is because Americans don't remember the social contract and they don't take it seriously. Or not that some of them don't, but most of them are just kind of like busy. But if you asked Americans what the foundation is of our social contract, the heart of our social contract, that it's the government must recognize that rights come from God. They are not the givers of rights, and that voters, the people, are sovereign, and that they are mere servants of those people, and that we will agree to give up part of our rights, lock in our social contract. We will agree to give up part of our birthrights, given rights in anarchy, in order to not live in anarchy, but live in what is the most representative version of government the world has ever seen. And in response, the government must recognize that these core rights are not in dispute. And they're inalienable. They come from God, not from the government. You can't fuck with them. And they don't believe that. The state doesn't believe that. They don't adhere to the social contract anymore. And in fact, you could make a case. They didn't just cross the Rubicon. They jumped right over it. And they one-upped some of the worst tyrants of the 20th century, because there's an argument to make there. Watch it. They haven't lined people up yet. They have started rounding them up and throwing them behind bars. They haven't started straight executing people yet. That's coming. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, okay. It's coming. You want to name and you think you're special? You still think you live in a special country or something? Power's power. Human nature is human nature. It's coming. And let me roll the clip and let me let her say what she's going to say, and then we'll talk about it. I just sat and thought about it, and I was like, that's not inaccurate, is it? It's not, if you're being honest. That's all.
You said a long time ago that if they continue to prosecute Donald Trump, if they continue to persecute him, we're going to see a massive amount of support for him. And it does seem that has played out exactly as you said it would. All over Twitter or X, all over social media, there are people who are saying, I didn't really plan to vote for Donald Trump, but I absolutely am now.
Well, right. And I think that's the natural conclusion of what would happen, the outcome, when you go this far. The only thing I worry about is, is it too late? I mean, yeah. I'm glad to see everyone putting their upside down American flags, flying them proudly. Yet, what's happening to President Trump is so horrible and so disgusting and so despicable. But they really should have been outraged by not just what happened to him, but what happened to all of us on November 3rd, 2020. Because that's why all of this is happening, Emerald. You know it. I know it. Yeah. It wouldn't be possible. They stole our votes. They stole our country. They stole our constitutional republic in the way that we don't have a constitution anymore. You wonder how they can just violate it with impunity. They one-upped Stalin. It's show me the man, I'll show you the crime. I don't even have to show you the crime.
Time out. There it is. So, and I'm sorry for, I'm not going to leave Liz like that. There we go. Couldn't do it to you, Liz. They did one up Stalin. They did. At least they read the crime. There's no crime. That's insane. At least the Soviets kept up with pretenses that you have to actually commit a crime. They didn't just fabricate them or not name them at all. Also, I want to get to what she had said there before, because I don't think the two are unrelated. What's going on today in the House, wasting their time, and the GOP is totally effing clueless. COVID and the election rigging is one in the same. It was done on multiple levels. And COVID was a huge part of that. Folks, we now know this virus was created. Wet market. Why would they lie? And why would Fauci continue to this day to try to lie and cover up when he found out that this was not a natural virus? The result of the pandemic was a complete overhauling of our electoral system. Government can't take in a 30-day period, 60-day period. They're going to expect 50 states and territories to overhaul their entire election systems. Come on, folks. And once you let them get away with something, that's, by the way, I always say this. I mean, if you have never read The Crisis in Leviathan by Robert Higgs, you have got to read it. I may make it a book club one. We may read that in book club. It is such a seminal work that everyone should know. Everyone should at least be well versed in Robert Higgs's thesis. And that thesis is exactly what James Madison argued. A crisis is, in fact, the rallying cry of the tyrant. And when crisis comes, the public, because he's an economist and he measures it through the public sector, as you would measure government, they will use crisis to gain more power. And then when that crisis is over, even if it recedes the power that you have lent them, it will never fully go back to where it was before that crisis. And you have forever lost those rights. The pandemic would be a great example of the crisis in Leviathan. Are we ever going to see a rolling back of some of the bloated state that grew as a result of the pandemic? Are we going to see the rolling back of the bloated state that now handles elections the way they handle them, which is not secure and not safe and not legitimate? It's not credible. Are we ever going to see these? Not with the Republican Party the way they are, or any party, not without an effective countervailing force against those who are making these, who are pushing these tyrannies, this authoritarianism. It's that simple. So she's, it's not trying to be Johnny Rainclown, but it's a valid question to ask. Is it too late? Americans, let's say they deliver a resounding rebuke to the Democrat. I mean, Biden gets his ass kicked. Even let's say I'm wrong and Republicans win the House, the way Decision Desk is projecting, they still will hold the House and win the Senate. So what? Who's in Congress? Who's in Congress? Vince Fong replaced former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Bordeaux's not even, trying to challenge him in that next one because they have a special and then they have, they had 2 elections. He's not even trying. All of these people, for the most part, are still there. It's not David Giglio going. It's not even Michael Boudreaux. It's a shill who caved the first chance he gets. John Duarte still hasn't sent out a statement. So what's the difference? Why not vote for Adam Gray? I'm serious. What's the fucking difference? There isn't one. Who's got an R after his name? That's a stupid reason to vote for somebody. I'm sorry. In the year 2021, because somebody has an R after their name is a stupid reason for a Republican to vote for them. Sorry. This, winning is just, all that matters is that we win. It's bull. That's bull. Not in the Congress. It's not. That's not true when it comes to the Congress or the Senate, whether it's the House or the Senate or governorships for that matter. I'm not going to revisit Larry Hogan. I think we all know what I think of Larry Hogan. I think I made that clear on Friday. What's the difference? All John Duarte cares about is playing ball with the state so he can get rid of his EPA violations, he can kill entire populations of shrimp again, and he continues to take advantage of slave labor. That's all he cares about. And he'll play ball. The FBI is still holding that over his head. You know what I'm talking about. Matt, get out of the race and I'll make a contribution to your other race. Wink, wink. Bribery. It's bribery. Hello. The FBI knows all about it. Anytime John Duarte tries to step out of line, they'll step on his dick. Dude, that's it. Excuse me. Let me get those balls. Back in line you go. So I get where she's coming from. And you let him get away with the Russia hoax. First of all, you let him get away with the Iraq war. You let him get away with lying about weapons of mass destruction. You let him get away with ignoring every damn warning sign that millions of people would lose their homes unless you did something about it. I mean, we could just keep going on and on. Oh, that's a good vision right there. Thank you for that good news, my love. What are they, I mean, they're going to get Russia. They should have been punished to the max. Folks, the Russia collusion hoax is sedition. That's legit sedition. Think about what they did. They fabricated a hoax to unseat a legitimately elected sitting president. They got away with it. So roll the rest of the clip for Liz.
Even have to have the jury find you guilty of a crime. We're just going to declare you guilty. Show me the man, I'll show you your guilt, and I'll try to throw you in jail. We're at a very terrible place right now, and I am glad to see people seemingly are waking up, and I hope it's true. I know the people are. The people have been awake for a while, and that is growing, and that's a good thing. So I hope good will come out of it, but it's just so sad that it's so unnecessary and we never had to get to this point. But it's like President Trump just said, hey, it's not pleasant, but I'm honored to be fighting this fight because it is about saving our Constitution. And that's what it's all about.
Did you guys see the interview with Fox? I have a clip from that interview, but it's not that clip specifically. And I'm going to play it. With Pete Hegseth, forgot who else is in this. You're going to see it in a second. And I said, what are you going to do if you're sentenced to jail? Like, are you worried about jail time? I mean, this guy's gangster. It's like, I ain't begging for nothing. He will run for president from a jail cell. And I am not at all convinced he won't win. Or the double wide that Comey thinks he should put a former president in. A double wide. This is a man, of course, who played a key role in this seditious plot to overturn a president. He doesn't even deserve a double wide. He deserves a dark hole where he should be thrown for the rest of his natural life. That's where traitors go. Dark holes to rot. Here's another clip from that because we're running out of time and I want to say this. It is now coming to everyone's attention that what I have been saying for months is much what like Tucker said when Jack Posobiec asked him, Rich Barrett's the people's pundit. He says he's worried they're going to kill Trump if he's going to win. If they do all this and he still wins, they're going to kill him. Tucker's like, of course they are. He's got to be thinking about this. I'm going to play a clip and I'm going to see if there's anyone out there who is still so naive as to think the state will not take a leader from you in that way. Listen to what he says here and you tell me if you think this man's safe.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. Attorney General.
Folks, those are like the 3 biggest state secrets that they're trying to hide from you right now. That the government played a role in the assassination of JFK. They killed your president. That they're all a bunch of sex trafficking, disgusting pigs. And that they all lied to you about 9/11. And squandered our peace dividend and the lives of your children. The physical well-being and mental well-being of your children that you entrusted to them to go fight an enemy that they created, by the way. They created Al-Qaeda. Watch George, George Wilson. What was his first name? Mujahideen. Translates into freedom fighter. They were a freedom fighter when they were fighting the Russians, too. We gave them all those weapons. Then we started to park our infidel asses in their most holiest of places. You think of what? That's just all right? Ron Paul was right all along. Why don't you just keep your ass behind your own border? Don't worry about overexpansion. We're an insular power. We are an insular power. We don't need to do what we do. We do it because we are a textbook overexpander, ruled by a textbook bunch of petty tyrants who can't govern for shit, save their lives, so they throw their political opponents in jail, persecute their enemies, kill their enemies. That's where we live now. Anyway, I'm going to call it because I want to run a clip on the outro here on the way out of here. And it's going to go over the 2 o'clock hour. You can watch it if you want to. I think it's important because we had talked about this in great detail. And now here we are. It's like 2 years later, over 2 years later now, almost. Every time they get behind these narratives, it's wrong. Every time they get behind these stupid ideas, they're lying and it's wrong. And they can't even do it well. They can't even win a war they start. The only people that they can terrorize is their own population. Nobody else is afraid of them anymore. We're a freaking joke. I don't know that we did this in 20 years. We blew the most powerful superpower status enjoyed by any civilization in the history of human civilization. We blew it in a 20-year period. At least it took the Romans 1,000 years to it up. Alexander's empire was broken up, but at least, my God, Ptolemy and his family kept that going in Alexandria for a long time. We blew our superpower status in 2 decades. That's a real feat. Especially considering we did have the strongest hand out of anyone I just mentioned. Another huge threat, obviously, Donald Trump poses is to their foreign aid embezzlement schemes, foreign aid and money laundering schemes. And there's been one voice who's been maligned by everybody. Meanwhile, because I know I got bored and I decided I want to go back to school and study international relations because I effing felt like it. Nobody could lay a glove on this guy in the world of academia. And I've always said that it's funny. Democrats are supposed to be the party of ivory towers and the academic elites. And somehow the foreign policy establishment, now represented by the Democratic Party, but also Republicans are their bitch, they don't adhere to the academics. They don't adhere to what the academic research suggests. It's not dominated by the democratic peace theory. It's a joke in academia. It's not dominated by neoconservatism. That's a joke in academia. It's not dominated by neoliberalism. That's a joke in academia. It's dominated by realism. And everything this man said was right. But before I play the video, don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them. Smash the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. About 65% of you who watch are not subscribed on some videos. Not all, on some. So we'd very much appreciate it if you did that. And if you could, take a minute of your time, if you're watching on YouTube, to mosey on over to Rumble, sign up and subscribe there and like the video. It's a huge help to us. But of course, the best place, as always, to follow us is right there, peoplespundit.locals.com. Thank you to our sponsors, as always, at Freedom Gold USA, Jam and Bean, all of them. Their links are in the description. You want to take advantage of their offers. Jam and Bean, by the way, is back with their 40% off offer. So if you sign up on Jam and Bean for a new subscription, coffee, popcorn, tea, whatever you get, If you use the promo code TPP40 at checkout, you will get 40% off that subscription. And then when it renews every month, you get another 10% off. That just keeps on there and stays on there. It's a great deal, and I would definitely urge you to go take a look at it. I love their coffee. Their teas made me a tea drinker, and they got a lot of other great stuff, whether it's the syrup they get from Michigan. By the way, Patriots Against the COVID Tyranny, by the way. That's that company. Great guys, great family. And great product. And as you guys know, I absolutely love their popcorn. Yo, who stole my sour cream and chives? I was just about to show it. Oh, it's on now. My son's home from school. He snuck in here and stole my sour cream and chives. Oh, it's on like Kong. I just noticed it's not here anymore. Thank you for the Winston Toy Puppy Funds. That'll go right back into the show. If you want to support the Public Polling Project, the link is in the description. Share it far and wide. We had a great day on Friday. If we keep up the push, we'll be there in no time and we can get back in the field. Maybe by this weekend. I don't want to say it because if it slows down or poofs out, we won't be able to. But if it keeps up and we keep the crowdfunding is as strong as it was on Friday, we'll make it. And we'll be out in the field. And the new poll that we did just before the conviction is on local still. If you guys go check it out, it was Trump plus 2.5. And it'll be interesting to see what it is now. Remember, Biden needs a 4-point lead to ensure he wins the Electoral College. He doesn't get that, at least he's going to lose. All right. Unless, it's possible Republicans can screw it up in some way, shape, or form. But look, Hillary Clinton got her butt kicked in the Electoral College, winning with over 2-point lead in the popular vote, about 2.5. Biden needed over 4 in order to win get the victory that he got in 2020. So I don't see that changing anytime soon, but we'll see. It could. Things can change, but that is the benchmark that everybody who knows their stuff is using. So, what else? Am I missing anything? No, I'm not. I guess I'm not. But deuces as always. Absolutely. But don't go anywhere. If you have some time, I want you to watch this interview. It is long. I'm probably going to just let it ride. But thanks for watching Inside the Numbers, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. All right. All the best.
Impossible. So I want to switch gears a little bit to Ukraine and to check in on where we are now. You were possibly one of the most maligned people in the foreign policy world at the outbreak of the conflict, even though you'd long been and writing about the fact that it was in fact NATO expansion and U.S. policy vis-a-vis Russia, that it was a contributing factor to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Several years now into U.S. policy and many of the Ukrainian stalled so-called counteroffensive and ongoing Russian gains, how do you assess the situation in Ukraine today?
Oh, I think the Russians are clearly in the driver's seat. The balance of power, I think, through most of 2022 favored the Ukrainians and the West on one side over the Russians. In late 2022, the Russians began to mobilize in a serious way. And then in 2023, over the course of 2023, the balance shifted in significant ways towards the Russians. And now in 2024, we're 5 months into 2024, the balance continues to shift more and more in Russia's favor. And if you look at what's happening on the battlefield, the Russians are really pounding the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are in deep trouble. This is a war of attrition. This is basically, Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier standing toe-to-toe and beating the living daylights out of each other. Two big armies just pounding each other. And the question is, which army is going to bleed the other army white first? And it is, to me, manifestly clear that the Russians are bleeding the Ukrainian army white, and the Ukrainians are not able to do much to the Russians anymore. And the reason for this is that the balance of manpower and the balance of firepower, these are two indicators that really matter in a war of attrition, decisively favor the Russians. The Russians have an enormous advantage in artillery. They have an enormous advantage in air power. those two things add up to say they have an enormous advantage in firepower being air power plus artillery put together. And then if you look at the manpower balance, the Russians have a significant advantage there. You know, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier on the front lines is 43 years old. Yeah. 43 years old. Combat is designed for young men and now young women, right? You want people in their 20s. You don't even want people in their 30s. The idea that the average age of a soldier on the Ukrainian side is 43 years old is hard to believe. Furthermore, you have a significant problem with draft dodging inside of Ukraine. All sorts of young Ukrainian men fully understand that Ukraine is doomed and they don't want to die in a lost cause. Therefore, it's very hard for the Ukrainian military to mobilize people. Moreover, you have a huge number of Ukrainian men who are of draft age who are in the European Union and don't want to come back to Ukraine and fight. So the Ukrainians are at a significant disadvantage in terms of the balance of soldiers on the front line. And as I said before, they're at a significant disadvantage in terms of the balance of firepower. And this is a war of attrition. So they are being clobbered on the battlefield day by day. And eventually that military is going to suffer a significant defeat. They're going to be in a position where they can no longer carry on the war.
What do you think the political calculation is in Washington at this point? Because, you know, from an outsider vantage point, I think in the early days, back when there was potential peace negotiations on the table, there was a lot of arrogance. There was a thought, no, we can push for a total victory. Then we had the counteroffensive and all the hopes surrounding that. That's when Ukraine is going to be able to take back significant amount of terrain. That obviously didn't happen. Now there doesn't even seem to be a narrative about how this is going to play out, how it's going to result in anything other than disaster. So what do you see as Washington's political calculation being at this point?
Well, in terms of a purely political calculation, I think, given that the election's coming up in early November, the administration wants to make sure that Ukraine does not suffer an obvious defeat before early November, before the election.
Yep.
They would go to great lengths to prevent that from happening. I think the story that people tell themselves, which they probably don't believe very much anymore, is that if Ukraine can hold out in 2024, by 2025, all of this weaponry that we have in the West that we're building for Ukraine will be available, and we can shift it, or we can send it to Ukraine in 2025, and that will shift the balance back in favor of Ukraine. It will look like the situation that you described, Crystal, in 2022. That's, I think, that's the most optimistic story that people tell themselves. But my sense is that deep down at this point in time, most people fully understand that Ukraine is doomed, that the only interesting question at this point in time is how much territory are the Russians going to capture before this turns into a frozen conflict. But there's really no way to rescue the situation here. The Ukrainians are simply doomed. They can't fix the manpower problem. And with regard to the weaponry problem, we don't have the weaponry to give them. And we're not going to be able to spin up the industrial base to provide them, even in 2025, with enough weaponry to rescue the situation. But again, even if we give them the weaponry, they have a huge manpower problem. And the Russians just get stronger and stronger. Putin is on a roll. The Russians are on a roll. So I think that what you're going to see here is what I call an ugly Russian victory.
Professor, here in Washington, the justification for the Ukrainian cause is if we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, then Estonia, Latvia, and the other NATO countries are at risk. You have long argued, and I've long agreed with you, that what happens in Ukraine is not all of that much interest. But what would you say to those who say, that's why, Professor Mearsheimer, we must give even more to Ukrainians to make sure that that doesn't happen? Why does this not actually matter that much? And what's wrong with that logic about if we don't stop him here, that he'll continue onwards?
Well, first of all, I don't even think that Putin is interested in conquering all of Ukraine. He's never said that he's interested in conquering all of Ukraine. And in fact, he's told the Ukrainians in recent months that the great danger to them is that Romania and Poland and countries on Ukraine's western border may someday take territory in western Ukraine that once belonged to them. It's very important to understand that a huge chunk of western Ukraine once belonged to Poland. Right. And there are a number of Poles who would like to get that territory back. I'm not arguing that Poland is operating on the basis that it can get that territory back. But nevertheless, Putin has said that there is a danger that this will happen. That indicates to you that he is not planning to take Western Ukraine. And indeed, he would be crazy to take Western Ukraine because it's filled with ethnic Ukrainians who hate Russians. And he would have a major insurgency on his hands if he tried to conquer all of Ukraine. So he's not even going to take all of Ukraine. He's never been interested in taking all of Ukraine. Now, the idea that he's going to then, go conquer countries in Eastern Europe, he's never indicated any interest in that. And by the way, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union occupied all of Eastern Europe. It was a nightmare. The Soviets have been there, done that, and it did not work out very well. The last thing they want to do is start occupying countries in Eastern Europe so they can do Hungary 56 again, Czechoslovakia 68 again, East Germany 53 again. The problems that they had with the Poles were legion. The problems they had with the Romanians and the Albanians were even worse. I mean, the idea that they want to conquer territory and recreate the Russian Empire in Eastern Europe is just not a serious argument. It's standard threat inflation that we engage in here in the West, all for the purposes of getting the public to support continued support of Ukraine. And but again, this is just not a serious threat.
Professor, at the beginning of this conflict, we really threw the kitchen sink at Russia in terms of sanctions, made it maybe the most sanctioned country on the entire planet. I'm not going to say that those sanctions didn't bite at all, but the Russian economy seems to be doing fairly well in spite of those massive coordinated Western sanctions. What is the significance of the failure of that sanctions regime here?
It's very significant. I mean, if you go back to 2022, when the war first started, and as we were talking about before, it looked like the Ukrainian military was doing very well against the Russian military in 2022. It was that factor, plus the fact that we thought that the sanctions would work, and we thought the sanctions would bring the Russians to their knees. So it was the combination of a belief that the sanctions would work, combined with the success of the Ukrainian military on the battlefield in 2022, that led us to think that we could win the war against Russia. You want to remember that there were peace negotiations that started immediately after the war began in February. These were the famous peace negotiations between Zelensky's side and Putin's side in Istanbul.
You all know what I'm
like the two sides were.
John Mearsheimer, ladies and gentlemen, John Mearsheimer. He deserves a round of applause. For those of you who had a chance to stick around to watch that, I'm glad you did. You got something out of it for sure. All right, nothing but love for you guys, and we will see you on Wednesday.